Egypt did not simply live. Egypt endured. It endured like a beast carved from stone, silent, patient, watching generations rise and rot. It endured through heat that burned lungs, through Nile floods that swallowed villages, through wars that never fully ended, and through priests who controlled not only temples but the meaning of reality itself. In Egypt, everything had a shadow. The crown had a shadow. The gods had shadows. Even the dead had shadows. And the most dangerous shadows were the ones that smiled. Before he became the boy king of gold, before his mask became the face of an entire civilization, before the world turned his tomb into a haunted headline, he was a child born inside a collapsing universe. His name did not begin as Tutankhamun. It began as Tutankhaten, the living image of Aten. That name was not an identity. It was a wound forced into history. His father, Akhenaten, had committed a crime Egypt could not forgive. He tried to rewrite the gods, not by adding a new god to the pantheon, not by honoring another name, but by attempting to suffocate the old ones. Temples were abandoned, offerings stopped. The priesthood of Amun, once the hidden spine of the state, was cut, starved, and humiliated. The divine economy collapsed. And when the divine economy collapses, everything collapses with it. The harvest feels cursed, the air feels heavy, the people feel watched by angry emptiness. Akhenaten built Akhetaten in the desert, a city without ancestors, a city with no protective ghosts, a city that tried to begin Egypt again as if the past could be erased like chalk. But Egypt is not chalk. Egypt is carved, and what is carved does not disappear. It becomes a scar. Inside that desert capital, the child grew in a palace where the sun disk was painted everywhere, where rays ended in hands offering life like chains, where smiles were too careful and prayers sounded like orders. The child's body was already betraying him. Pain in his foot, weakness in his bones, breath that sometimes came short, a fragile frame forced into the myth of divinity. He moved like someone carrying weight he could not name, and everyone around him pretended not to notice. Then Akhenaten died. The palace did not collapse loudly. It collapsed quietly, the way rotten wood breaks, softly at first, then all at once. The old gods returned, not as gentle rescuers, but as creditors. Amun demanded his temples back. Osiris demanded the dead be honored properly again. The priesthood demanded its power. The army demanded stability. The people demanded bread, and the return of the invisible protections they had been taught to fear losing. And so the child was moved like a piece on a board, not dragged, not shouted at, not publicly humiliated, because Egypt understood theater. Egypt understood how to destroy someone politely. Tutankhaten's name was rewritten, Aten was erased, Amun was restored. He became Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun. The new name sounded like a rescue. But it was a confession. It was Egypt forcing the boy to apologize for the sins of his father. He was crowned while still nearly a child, seated on a throne larger than his body, surrounded by men whose hands were soft from power, not labor. A stood close, an elder with calm eyes that seemed to measure people like weights. Horemheb stood closer than a general should, silent, disciplined, waiting. The priest stood closest of all, because a priest does not need a sword when he controls eternity. Tutankhamun tried to be a king. He issued decrees restoring the old gods. He reopened temples. He returned offerings. He repaired sacred damage. He moved the court back toward the ancient heart of Egypt's religion. He did what he was told, and sometimes, rarely, he did what he believed. But the restoration was not peace. It was an execution of a previous era. Names were chiseled out of stone, faces of Akhenaten were destroyed, cartouches were scraped away until the stone bled dust. Records were rewritten. History was edited like a corpse being prepared, parts removed, parts concealed, the final body made presentable. This was Egypt's real power, not conquest, but control of memory. And memory is a weapon. The boy king's marriage to Ankhesenamun bound him to legitimacy like rope. Their youth was not tenderness, it was duty. They tried to produce an heir because Egypt requires continuity, like lungs require air. But Egypt gave them tragedy instead. Two tiny daughters, stillborn, wrapped and sealed, later buried with the king like proof that the bloodline had failed to hold. The palace halls remained beautiful, but beauty in Egypt was often a mask worn over rot. Behind the ceremonial calm, the state was devouring itself. Rival factions, priests reclaiming wealth, generals measuring their moment, officials repositioning, and everyone treating the boy's fragile body as a timer counting down toward opportunity. Tutankhamun's body continued to fracture under the weight of divinity. He limped, suffered, endured pain that could not be prayed away. Every public appearance was a performance designed to hide decay. Artists stretched his figure taller in reliefs. Scribes praised victories he never fought. Priests spoke of divine favor while watching his health with calculating eyes. The king was becoming an image more than a man, and in Egypt, images could survive without the body. Behind the walls of the palace, decisions were being made without him. Egypt had learned long ago how to continue while a ruler faded quietly. Power did not rush. It waited. Then came the fracture. A fall. A wound. A leg broken badly enough to expose bone. Pain that did not heal. Fever that climbed too fast. Whether accident or design, no one recorded the truth honestly. Because Egypt does not write crimes. It buries them. Tutankhamun died young. Not in battle. Not in glory. Not with a speech or prophecy. He died as systems prefer their mistakes to die. Quietly, surrounded by ritual, and immediately replaced by procedure. The palace did not erupt. It sealed. A dead king is dangerous only if chaos follows. Egypt allowed no chaos. The body was moved swiftly, doors closed, messengers were silenced, and the most sacred emergency began. Because a pharaoh's corpse is not a corpse, it is a vessel. If the vessel decays improperly, the transformation fails. And if the transformation fails, the king does not die. He returns wrong. The embalmers entered the chamber not as mourners, but as engineers of eternity. Knives blessed with spells cut into flesh already cooling. Organs were removed and placed in jars guarded by gods. The brain was pulled through the nose, the skull emptied of thought. The heart, seat of judgment, was left behind to face the scales of Osiris. The body was drowned in natron, dried like sacred meat, every trace of moisture erased. Then came the resins, thick, black, suffocating. They poured them into the chest, into the skull, over the skin, sealing the king inside his own preservation. They stuffed linen into cavities to rebuild a form that sickness had weakened. They wrapped him again and again, not gently but firmly, each layer tightening like a lock. Between the layers, they hid amulets like weapons placed against the invisible. Words were written on gold and tucked where no thief could see without tearing holiness apart. Spells for protection, spells for vengeance, spells to command the gates of the underworld. Then they placed the mask, solid gold, heavy, cold, a divine face over a broken body. The mask was not decoration, it was authority. It declared that whatever weakness the boy had in life would not follow him into death. Gold does not rot. Gold does not doubt. Gold does not forget. Coffins followed, one inside another, each layer a denial of mortality. The innermost clung so tightly to the body that centuries later it would refuse to release him without violence. Then came the flood of objects. Not arranged, compressed. The tomb was too small. Time was too short. Politics was too dangerous. Chariots were dismantled and stacked like sacrificed animals. Thrones were shoved against walls. Beds shaped like beasts pressed against shrines. Weapons crossed each other not in honor but necessity. Food jars were sealed. Wine labeled with years that no longer mattered. Clothing folded for a body that would never feel cold. Statues filled every gap. Gods, servants, duplicates of the king himself. Because if something went wrong in the afterlife, there had to be replacements. This was not generosity. This was fear. Fear that the king might rise incomplete. Fear that the rituals, rushed and imperfect, might fail. Fear that Egypt had violated its own laws of eternity. The walls were painted fast, too fast. Scenes borrowed from older tombs, spells copied without the care usually demanded by centuries of tradition, errors hidden under pigment, corrections rushed, then the final act. The tomb was sealed, stone doors closed, rubble poured in, names erased from public memory. Tutankhamun disappeared. Not honored, not celebrated, removed. His monuments were dismantled, his name scratched from king lists, his reign treated like an inconvenience between stronger men. Egypt moved on, and the tomb slept.